In my view, Senator Gary Winfield really is a force in our state legislature, serving 3 terms in the General Assembly and now in his 5th term in the state Senate. He has worked tirelessly to address the needs of all residents, including poor and disadvantaged communities. Senator Winfield, responsible for a very long list of efforts and accomplishments related to criminal justice reform. The most notable is the one that was passed last summer, HB 6004, a broad and far-reaching bill known generally as the Police Accountability Bill. Referencing what our governor said at the time he signed this very important piece of legislation, which really is a model for every state. Governor Lamont said, "These reforms are focused on bringing real change to end the systemic discrimination that exists in our criminal justice system and policing systems that have impacted minority communities for far too long. Ultimately, what we are enacting today are policies focused on providing additional safeguards to protect people's lives and make our communities stronger. Our nation and our state have been having a conversation on this topic for decades, and these reforms are long overdue." Senator Gary Winfield was responsible for championing and getting this legislation passed. We cannot thank him enough, in my view. Thank you so much.
There's a lot of talk about what happened last year, the Police Accountability Bill. What many people don't know is there have been several police accountability bills, but each of those bills until 2015 had been one small section. But in 2015, I changed the way that we do police accountability in the state. So there was conversation about it. We'd had the things we had seen, Trayvon Martin and all of these things. And I was frustrated about the fact that Connecticut wasn't doing what I felt was enough. And I wanted to do more than, we're going to take this little section. We're going to do this minor tweak to the law. I wanted to write an omnibus bill where we change huge parts of what we do in police accountability. That wasn't the way we did things, and nobody was trying to hear that. So I'm advocating for this, advocating for it, and we're not getting much traction. And so what happened was, it was a Friday. Leadership said to me, if you could get the attorneys to do your bill, to write it up over the weekend, you come in Monday with the bill, we'll do whatever it is you want. Well, there were not going to be any attorneys available. And so what I did was I went and I studied the way that they wrote their language. I came in Monday with a fully drafted bill, and that was a 2015 bill. That's the bill that gave us body cameras, that said that police departments have to be more diverse than they are, that said that when police officers are operating in such a way as there's misconduct and there's an investigation going on, if they leave one department, they can't go to another department. A lot of stuff that's really important that people never really saw because they weren't paying attention, because this issue wasn't in the news the way that it currently is. And then we did a bill last year, another big bill. And this came out of an incident that happened in New Haven, where there was a police-involved shooting involving 2 different departments, the Hampton Department and the Yale Department. This bill stops police from shooting at moving vehicles and a whole bunch of other stuff that, again, because it wasn't in the news in the way that it was over this summer, people did not really notice. And then we come to the issue of George Floyd and what we saw over the summer. And it was not in many people's mind in government that we were going to do another bill, because we'd just done a bill in 2019, and people, strangely enough, were getting over that, right? Getting over the fact that we actually did something, we had some progress. And so, a lot of people were like, we just did a bill. To be honest with you, some people are still getting over 2015, because see, when you're doing good stuff, people need time to get over it. But when I saw that, I was contacted by people about what I thought about it. And I immediately said, well, we're doing the bill. And people in government contacted me and asked me, when did this conversation happen? And the conversation hadn't happened, but we needed to do a bill. And we needed to get as much done as we could get done that we hadn't been able to get done in the prior bills that we did. And then after that, you saw a lot of people take to the streets and protest and say they wanted to see something happen. And so I decided that I had the right perspective here. And so I began to push on this police accountability bill. It didn't make a lot of people happy. I got all kinds of people telling me what would happen to me and what they would do and all kinds of things. And I'd seen in my work that people really get irritated when you start having conversations, not just about changing what's happening with police, but about why we have to change what's happening with police. Because see, in my rhetoric, I talk about race and the interactions between the races. And I talk about the history that we have that people don't like to talk about. And so when we did the 2019 bill, there was a group of police on an online forum who suggested that, and I'm just going to use the plain language, if it offends you, it offends me too, but it's what they said, that the nigger should be dragged in chains back to slavery. These are people who are sworn to serve and protect, but this is what they believe because we were operating to make sure there were guardrails. The 2020 bill, the 2019 bill, and the 2015 bill had at their core the same thing. There's a dynamic, a power dynamic that exists. We give power to the police, but we don't check that power. And when we don't check that power, the things that happen in our society are reflected in the way that that power is used. So in neighborhoods like mine, disrespect is evidenced constantly in the smallest things, in the way that they fly down these streets, but they don't fly down the streets up over the hill and back down the hill where there are no Black folks. It's evidenced in a way that they don't bother to stop for lights at all ever here. It's evidenced in a way when they interact with people, how they talk to them. And so for me, that's not fine. And so I wanted to do the bill. And I know that that bill was connected to a long history as well. Everything is connected to a history. We don't always see it. That's connected to what happened to Jimmy Lee Jackson back in the 1960s with the police there. That's connected to what happened with Rodney King, and a long, long history of things that we have seen and or chosen not to see. And I felt like I live in the state of Connecticut. So in the state where I live, where I have some power to do something about it, we will. And so that's why that bill became something that we did something about. And it turns out that despite the fact that across the country, Connecticut is not the only place where people came out in places where they don't normally come out to talk, to protest, to support things that they don't normally support. Across the United States, this happened. But it turns out that across the United States, very few places did anything at all. No place did a bill like we did. And that's a travesty. All of that effort, all of those allies, all of that work, all of those people, and you have to think about what we're talking about. In the middle of the COVID pandemic, people potentially put their lives on the line to say that what we're seeing in this country is not acceptable, and nothing, for the most part, came out of it. That is amazing to me. I'll stop and take questions. I see one that says, Gary, do you think the current police accountability bill that passed last year needs any tweaking/improvement? I think that almost any bill that we pass needs tweaks. I think we have a section that deals with an independent investigator, the Inspector General. Obviously, the way that we set it up led to a tie in terms of choosing that person, which means that we still don't have someone in that position. So yes, we need to do that. We have some changes to the use of force post police officer standard and training has subsequent to the passage of the bill come back with some things that they think that need to happen that I think we may actually agree with, which will shift the dates a little bit, probably about a year. And there are some minor tweaks that need to happen, but what will not be happening, despite what some people think should happen, is that we will not be walking back the issue of qualified or governmental immunity. We talked about governmental immunity. Qualified immunity is a federal concept. The state can't override that.
Wayne, can you ask a question?
In Bridgeport, where I'm located, we've had a whole lot of issues with police stuff, and being a former vice president of the NAACP. That's how I know, Gary, if you're a doctor, you can use your right to practice malpractice. If you're anything, you can lose your job. Police have been working with impunity forever. So I say to Gary, can we help you do what you do, even though the bill is on the table, to get folks more involved and even understand what that means?
I'll say this. What I said in a 10.5-hour debate that we had on police accountability, I reminded people and was willing to show them the picture that my wedding had 5 groomsmen and 2 of them were police officers, right? So I don't dislike police officers. I actually have some in the family and love these people. But that has nothing to do with the situation that we face. This is a structural thing. It's a cultural thing. And there are police officers who are amazing human beings. And there are police officers who are whatever pejorative thing you want to call them might not be too much. I was in the United States Navy. The minute I put on that uniform, I was nothing more than I was the minute I hadn't had it on. The fact that I wear a uniform doesn't tell you anything about me except that I wear the uniform. It may give you some clues as to something about me, but it doesn't tell you necessarily who I am. And there's some weird thing in this nation that as soon as somebody puts on a police uniform, they are all of the great things that the best amongst the police officers are. Again, this bill was about power and checking that power. And I think that's important. And what do you do to help me? So the police helped me somewhat themselves by threatening every legislator and telling them they would lose their election. And then they all won their elections when they voted for the bill. So that helped because it demonstrated that their power wasn't as much as many people believed that it was. But the thing that has to happen is the reason why that threat was a threat was because people really believed that if they voted for this thing that they believed in, by the way, that they would lose their seats. And they had to wrestle with, do I help these people who walk around afraid of the police in their own neighborhoods, or do I make sure I keep my seat? You want to help me? Make sure they understand that if the mere fact that they vote right is not political death notice. And it's that simple. And there are a lot of people who agree with me who never engaged in making a phone call, writing a letter, suggesting that within the districts where people believe they're in trouble, that they may not be. Now, I think a lot of legislators know now that that was a lot of talk. That's not the only issue. We have a lot of controversial issues. And if you believe that that issue is an issue of importance to you, then you have a responsibility to say to your legislator, hey, just so you know, I think this. Because I'll tell you, on most issues, I hear from no one. You know, people think it's a joke when we say on most issues we don't hear from 5 people, but it's the truth.
Thank you for that response. Just want to say thank you very much for what was a tremendous night. Thank you.